Hi, I'm Yvonne Adcall, Qualified Mental Retardation Specialist for the Wyoming Developmental Disabilities Division. Today I'm serving as your host as we take off to our trip to complete provider recertification. To prepare for departure, you will need a copy of your Wyoming Medicaid Rules, Chapter 45, the Provider Manual, and a copy of the DD Division Chapter 1 Rules for ISCS. These documents serve as tools for you not only with your provider recertification process, but as you provide services throughout the year. First, we understand that the provider recertification process can get confusing, especially with the new rules that have been promulgated. There are actually several paths to reach the destination of recertification. The main question to answer is if you are the type of provider who needs an on-site visit. The paths to recertification differ depending upon your answer to this question. We will cover this in more detail shortly. But first, we must prepare for takeoff. You will know that you are ready for takeoff when you receive a letter from the division informing you that your certification is going to be expiring within about 90 days. This letter includes the information you need to complete your recertification and have a smooth flight. Please take the time to read any letters and emails from the division. These are the two main avenues of communication we use to inform providers of important changes and other information. If you do not contact the division to recertify, then you will be decertified on your end certification date, and we will need to start the process over, including completing a background check to become a provider again. This is why it's so important to notify the division if your address has changed. As mentioned earlier, the recertification process varies depending on the services provided. For example, as a respite and/or personal care provider, you can choose not to provide services in your home or facility, just as an environmental modification or speech therapy provider. No services in home or facility providers submit all information for their recertification through the mail to the division and must sign a no services in home or facility form. More specifically, here are the providers who are not required to have an on-site visit to be recertified. Respite and/or personal care providers not providing services in a home they own or leased, environmental modification providers, specialized equipment providers, and speech therapy providers. For no services providers, the information that shall be submitted for most providers under this category includes but not limited to a copy of a written emergency plan with documentation of completed emergency drills, copies of CPR and first aid certifications, documentation of participant-specific training, driver's license and proof of auto insurance, policies and procedures including a policy on incident reporting that includes the division's notification of incident reporting process and restraint policies. Providers in this category shall also submit copies of billing and documentation. Please use the recertification matrix found in the recertification packet to be sure that you submit everything to the division. If everything is not submitted, including in your recertification packet, or if there's an area of noncompliance identified, the local QMRP will contact the provider and provide the providers with all recommendations in writing. The recommendations will include specific timeframes for completing follow-up. Providers serving people in a home or facility they own or lease are required to have an on-site visit. Please note as well that providers such as ISCS, residential and day habilitation, as well as supported employment and pre-vocational providers need to follow the process for providers who provide services in their home, as these providers do require an on-site visit even if they have selected not to provide services in a home or facility they own or lease. Providers requiring an on-site visit shall still submit information to the division prior to their on-site visit. Information to be submitted prior to the on-site includes but is not limited to copies of current CPR and first aid certifications, copies of driver's license and proof of auto insurance, policies and procedures, and a written emergency plan. Information that needs to be made available at the time of the on-site would include billing and documentation, documentation of testing emergency drills and smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, documentation of participant-specific training. The division will also complete a walkthrough of the provider's home or facility to ensure that there are smoke alarms on every level. If there are any natural gas appliances, that there's a carbon monoxide detector. The division will also check where weapons are kept, as well as medications and chemicals, including cleaning supplies. If everything is not included in your recertification packet, or there are concerns or areas of noncompliance identified at the on-site visit, The local QMRP will provide the provider with a written copy of all recommendations with specific timeframes for addressing the recommendations. Division staff will review all pertinent information and summarize the results of the recertification on forms that are internal to the division. The provider will receive a list of exemplary practices, commendations, suggestions, and recommendations from the division. However, we're not quite ready for landing yet. Once the recertification has been completed, the provider is responsible for completing a quality improvement plan for each recommendation made. The plan must include steps on how the provider is going to address the areas of noncompliance, who is responsible, and in what time frame the action steps are going to be completed. Providers can submit evidence that they are in compliance with the recommendation instead of submitting a quality improvement plan, as long as they can submit that information prior to the due date of their quality improvement plan. For example, if you have not completed an incident reporting policy but complete one that meets the standards a week after your recertification, you can submit the policy to the appropriate division staff instead of submitting a quality improvement plan. Please note, however, that if the policy does not meet the requirements, you may still need to be required to submit a quality improvement plan, unless you can fix the policy before the due date. The information covered so far addresses recertification for non-CARF providers. You should also be aware that all CARF accredited providers require an on-site visit and also required to submit information to the division prior to their site survey. Organizations are required to submit a copy of their current CARF report, a list of all case managers and caseloads, along with a listing of all waiver-funded service sites. Please refer to the intent to survey letter sent prior to the site survey to ensure all information is submitted. During the site survey, CARF agencies can expect an entrance and exit meeting along with 2 pre-scheduled meetings during the survey to discuss progress. The site survey team will review documentation of 10% of the participant files or a maximum of 10 files that will be randomly selected. The team will also review external and internal inspections as well as emergency drills, policies and procedures, and will conduct interviews with staff, participants, and guardians, as well as observe as many services as possible. At the exit meeting, the team will review the findings from the site review and will provide the organization with a list of all recommendations made with specific timeframes for addressing the recommendations. In order to assure that we have a safe flight, both the division and providers have specific responsibilities throughout the recertification process. The division must send out recertification letter to all non-CARF providers at least 90 days prior to their end certification. The letter includes instructions on what needs to be done, division contact information, and timeframes for completing the packet. Annually, the division sends out a tentative schedule for all CARF accredited organizations, listings the dates for their certification. These letters are usually sent out around December. The agency will have 30 days to contact the division to request different dates if the dates assigned to the agency will not work. Then 60 days prior to the provider survey, the local division staff will send out recertification paperwork to the agency. The agency will have to complete the paperwork and return it to the division within the time frame specified in the packet. Provider responsibilities are to contact the appropriate division staff if an on-site visit is required, or if a CARF agency has to contact the division if there's a conflict with the dates that are assigned, to complete and submit all requested information and documentation, and to be available at scheduled times for the visit, to complete a quality improvement plan for each recommendation made. If you follow these steps, it will be a smooth ride, free from turbulence, and remember, there are several resources available if you need help.
Welcome to the Division's training on confidentiality. In this brief session, we will discuss releases of information, including when and why to use them, what the HIPAA law is and what it means to you, and the general role and purpose of confidentiality. Releases provide an important safeguard for the rights of people receiving waiver services. Releases can be thought of as a permission slip in that they allow providers to discuss information about a participant. Releases must be specific to the participant. Who is the information about? To the people who can receive and the people who can give out the information. The specific information or type of information, details about a doctor's visit, a surgery, or dietary needs, for what purpose the information can be shared, to transition to a new provider, to train residential staff, and exactly when the information can be shared, a one-time only date, during a month-long surgery preparation, or for 1 year from the date the release was signed. In 1996, Congress passed a federal mandate called the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. With the advent of electronic medical records, the need for protection of personal medical information became apparent. HIPAA was created to set boundaries for information sharing so that information can be shared to benefit participants, so that personal rights to privacy are protected, and so that individuals receive education about these needs and rights. All types of personal medical information are covered under HIPAA, including oral, written, and electronic information. For example, if covered information will be displayed on a computer screen, the user must ensure that the information is not visible to persons who do not have an approved reason to see the information. Written materials should be shredded when no longer needed, and conversations, whether in person or on a telephone, must take place in private areas. There are 3 general guidelines that greatly simplify concerns about how to abide by the HIPAA requirements: PHI, Minimum Necessary Standard, and TPO. PHI refers to protected health information. Any individually identifiable health information, name, social security number, address, birth date, etc., that is transmitted or maintained in any form or media must be considered HIPAA-protected information. The minimum necessary standard provides a rule of thumb to follow, which is that only the information which is absolutely necessary to provide services can be shared. TPO refers to treatment, payment, and operations. Providers are allowed to share information necessary to provide treatment, services in the case of the waivers, to receive payment for services, and to generally operate. Here are some examples. In order to provide services, each direct care staff person needs participant-specific training. Providers must include participant information as part of the billing process, and a provider may need to tell another provider the address of a participant's medical appointment in order to arrange transportation for the participant. There are penalties under HIPAA for wrongful disclosure of information, including fines ranging from $100,000 to $250,000 and even jail. Remember that wrongful disclosures may occur in day-to-day work activities that are incidental or are shared in good faith. It is when wrongful disclosures occur that are intentional that penalties will most likely be enforced. Chapter 38 of the Wyoming Medicaid rule explains the confidentiality requirements regarding Medicaid applicants or recipients, which includes waiver participants. This chapter gives detailed definitions and guidelines regarding confidentiality and the processes for sharing information, so it would be beneficial for any provider within the Medicaid system to review this chapter. The most important reason to maintain the confidentiality of participant information is to uphold dignity and respect for participants and to provide a high level of professionalism for all providers. Staff and providers have access to very personal and private participant information. With that access comes great responsibility to use the information appropriately and educate both participants and providers alike when breaches are possible.
Hi Chris, how are you doing?
Good, Yvonne, how are you?
I'm doing well. Are you guys ready for this meeting?
I am.
Great. Well, I think we're waiting for a couple more people and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. All right.
Well, I'm sure glad you're on Terry's team now. I think she really likes having you doing respite, and she loves having you as a case manager.
I really enjoy her. She's really growing and achieving her objectives.
Yeah, she's great to work with.
Oh, that reminds me, Chris, you work with Anita too, right?
I do.
Did you know she was in the hospital yesterday?
No, I didn't. Was it a seizure or what happened?
Well, we're not sure. They said that she might have to have an MRI, and
That sounds serious.
I'm gonna give her guardian a call and find out. So I'll let you know.
Let me know.
Who's her case manager?
It's Joshua. Joshua's her case
Oh, okay.
manager.
Yeah.
So she's doing pretty good.
All right.
The previous scenario was an example of inappropriate sharing of confidential information. The reason is that not everyone present at the team meeting was on both participants' teams. In the next scenario is an example of how misunderstanding the role of confidentiality can be an obstruction to providing services.
Denise, has the table been set for dinner?
I don't think it's quite done. Did the guys usually help with that?
They usually typically do. Oh, is that the door? I bet you that's Terry's guardian. Could you let her in?
Okay. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Come on in.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm Terry's guardian.
Hi, Grace. How are you doing today?
Good, Yvonne. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, I'm here to pick up Terry, but I'm wondering how she's doing. How was her that afternoon?
I don't think we can tell you that. That's confidential.
Oh, but I'm her guardian. I think you can give that information to me.
Oh, yeah, it's her guardian. You can tell her how Terry's day went.
Do we need to get a release?
No, not where she's the guardian.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, Denise.
Hey, Yvonne.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah.
My weekend was crazy. I worked this all weekend at the group home.
Oh my gosh. What
And-
all went on?
Oh my God, Kyle, Kyle Davis.
Well, yeah.
He was there and he had the hugest behavior. Just he dumped the entire dining room table and all the dinner for everybody. We had to recook it for 10 guys. Oh, it was an absolute mess. The police ended up being called. They had to come by. There was restraints used. It was a mess.
Well, I know that they're having a team meeting for him pretty soon, but
Oh, they need to. I mean, it's
gosh.
not soon enough.
as you can see, anytime information is shared in a public setting, you risk breaching confidentiality. Thank you for joining us in the training session on confidentiality. If you have any questions or would like additional information, you can refer to the division website, contact your local survey certification staff, or review the rules.
Welcome to the Division's training on grievances and complaints. During this training, you'll become aware of the process you should use when you have a complaint against another provider, what you can expect if someone files a complaint against you, as well as the Division's process for taking and processing complaints. As you continue through this training module, you will notice that the process has all the components of a mystery novel. It is like detective work with tip-offs, investigations, detectives, and evidence gathering. So let's probe further and examine the role we all play in the complaint process. The Division investigates complaints when a provider is non-compliant with Medicaid waiver rules, a participant's health and safety becomes a concern, and when the person who is filing the complaint, or complainant, has already taken steps to resolve the issue with the provider. CARF accredited providers are required to meet the CARF standards for complaints and grievances. These standards include documenting investigation of complaints, including the findings of the investigation, completing investigations within a specific time frame, notifying the complainant of the results of the investigation, and communicating the complaint process to participants and families. Non-CARF providers have to meet the requirements of Wyoming Medicaid rules, Chapter 45, which are similar to the CARF standards but are not as involved since non-CARF providers are not organizations but are independent providers. If you are the person who has the complaint, you are the complainant. As the complainant, you are required to notify the provider of your concern or issue in a professional manner, and then work with the provider to fix or resolve the issue through discussion. You may also use mediation or third-party intervention as a way to resolve a complaint. While working with the provider, you can expect them to take action to resolve the complaint. You should continue to work with the provider throughout this process, making sure you clearly document all the steps you have taken to resolve the problem. After working with the provider, if you're not satisfied with the results, you can file a complaint with the division. If you are the provider who has had a complaint filed against you and the waiver services you are providing, you also have responsibilities. When someone comes to you with a complaint, you're required to conduct yourself professionally and work to resolve the problem with the complainant. You need to take action to fix the issue in a positive and proactive manner, making sure to document the complaint, action steps you have taken, and the outcome. You are also required to share the documentation with the complainant and case manager as long as it doesn't violate HIPAA standards. Now here's the tip-off. When the division receives a complaint, the division staff member will verify that the complainant has worked with the provider to resolve the complaint. This will determine the next steps taken by the division. If the complainant has not worked with the provider to resolve the complaint, the division staff will determine if there are concerns about the health and safety of a participant. If this is the case, please note that the division will take the complaint immediately, and you will not be required to submit evidence you have attempted to resolve the issue beforehand. Health and safety related complaints will always be taken immediately. If the complaint is not health and safety related, division staff will encourage the complainant to work with the provider and document the steps taken to resolve the issue. If the complainant has worked with the provider to resolve the complaint, division staff will then take it as a formal complaint. Here's where program integrity becomes private eyes. If the complainant is a provider, they will be required to submit the complaint to the division in writing. Program integrity staff will request written documentation of resolution attempts that include dates and times of discussions, as well as discussion content and responses. The division now notifies the parties involved. The complainant will be notified in writing within 10 calendar days, explaining that the complaint has been received and including a suggested time frame for completing the investigation. The provider is also notified. This notification will be in writing, explaining that a complaint was received if there are no significant health and safety concerns present. However, if significant health and safety or rights are a concern, the provider will be notified by an unannounced on-site visit. The division now puts on their gumshoes and gets to work on the investigation. Steps the division may take when investigating a complaint include on-site visits with the provider and correspondence with parties involved via telephone, email, and certified mail. The division can also interview the provider, provider staff, participants, and families, and can review provider files, policies, and procedures. The division collects as much information as possible before determining if the complaint can be substantiated. After the investigation, the division once again notifies the parties involved. The complainant will receive notification that the complaint has been investigated and closed as long as the complainant is a participant or guardian. The provider will be sent a written report summarizing the results of the complaint investigation. The report will include findings, corrective actions, and applicable standards. The division then monitors the provider to ensure the corrective actions are completed. If the provider completes the corrective actions, division staff may follow up with the provider at the next recertification or throughout the year to serve as a support and ensure compliance. Case closed. Now we're going to review some frequently asked questions about our complaint process.
I have a complaint against the provider, but I'm afraid that the provider will take action or retaliate against the participant. Should I go ahead and file that complaint?
Please go ahead and file it. You can file complaints anonymously,
Okay.
and the division will work with you to investigate it so it's not real obvious who filed the complaint. If we do find that the provider is retaliating, we can also take action against them to have them stop.
I'm not a provider, a guardian, or a participant, but I'm worried about a particular person. Can I file a complaint?
Yes, you can. You can file a complaint with any division staff, and all we ask is that you give us as much specific information as you can so that we can do a thorough investigation.
What if my complaint's against a case manager?
We would ask that you first work with the case manager to try to work through your problems. The case manager may not be aware that you have the concerns that you have, and they should be given an opportunity to fix them. However, after you've worked with them, if you're still not satisfied with the resolution, you can file a complaint with the division.
So where can I find more information about the complaint process?
You can get more information from any division staff person in your geographic area. You can contact the division through the phone numbers on the website, or go to the website and access information directly about the complaint process. Remember, all providers must adhere to the complaint process that is outlined in Chapter 45, Section 31 of the Wyoming Medicaid rules. The rules can be found at the Secretary of State's website. The division works collaboratively with providers and can provide guidance when a provider is required to complete corrective actions. However, if a provider fails to complete corrective actions, the division will take action, which may include decertification as a waiver service provider, suspension of certification, imposing of civil monetary penalties, imposing a monitor, or placing conditions on a provider's certification. Thank you for joining us in the training session on complaints. If you have any questions or would like additional information, you can refer to the division's website, contact your local survey certification staff, or review the rules.
This is Dennis Yost with the Wyoming DD News Network. Tonight's lead story is about documentation and why documentation is important. During this news report, we hope to cover at least 10 reasons why providers must document their waiver services for the participants served. And now on with the report. Out of Cheyenne today, it was reported that accurate documentation verifies the type of service and frequency of services provided. Documentation will track and measure if the participant is making progress and ensure providers are providing the correct type and frequency of services. From Torrington, it was reported that the individual plan of care should drive everything you do for the participant, and documentation is proof that you are following the plan of care. It is important providers be accountable for the services provided and billed for, and documentation is a key component in this accountability process. There is a breaking news story from somewhere in Wyoming. We will now go to our field reporter, Denise Murphy, for a live report.
This is Denise Murphy from somewhere in Wyoming. It has been reported here that providers are required to submit copies of their documentation to the case manager by the 10th business day of the following month. This is required so case managers can ensure proper service delivery for the participant, as the case manager is required to monitor and oversee the participant's